I apologize for now changing the title because I have expanded the range of the talk. So I decided to go f go from design and objectives and wireframes to the actual pain points to prototypes. So it'll be a little bit more expansive in that way. Just a warning that it's not quite the right title. So I'm not sure if this is a good time to begin or
It is a good time to begin.
okay, great. So a little audience participation here. I'm John Chin, as it says right here. I'm a user experience researcher, and as part of research, I'm researching you, and that's to find out who you are, the audience. And so, question is, how many of you are working on site 100% of the time? And if you could just type it in or let me know, raise a hands, whatever it is. I have,
Nobody has raised their hand, John.
I
okay.
use onsite all the time.
Yeah. Majority here you're used to, but times have changed.
And how many of you are 100% remote?
Ooh, about half.
Half, 50%. And how many of you are quote unquote hybrid or telecommuter or where do you want to call yourselves?
The meeting is. So a couple of us are retired, so we're like always hybrid. Just from the minute we turn our computer on, we're hybrid. Because we'll take a phone call on the side or make a ham sandwich, take care of a kid. Yeah.
Ah. So these days, telecommuting and hybrids become more of a thing in the sense of since the pandemic, although it was pretty well known years ago, I'd say as far as 8 years back. And companies and organizations have been creating situations that are more flexible and work environments. So a few years back, I used to work as a contractor for the FAA. The headquarters pictured here down in Washington, D.C., massive building, 6 floors, and over 400,000 square feet. So you can imagine this is a whole square block, right behind I would say the Air and Space Museum, if you know where that is on the mall.
That's
Right behind
yeah.
them. This building is right behind it. And it's massive. A lot of people work there, and a lot of people don't work there. They had a mix of teams that included people who are 100% remote, people who are 100% on site, and people like myself who were telecommuters or hybrid, however. So that a real mix of people in these meetings. And of course, as most organizations, we had lots of meetings. So, yeah, I would get invitations like this on email and hitting my calendar, say, hey, you're going to meet at this time and place. And one time there was a meeting, and I went to this meeting, and there on the third floor in the West Wing, in the northern section of the West Wing, I met up with a few colleagues, but it was strange that the meeting room was half empty or half full, however you want to say it. Not everyone was there. And typically these meetings were well attended and usually all the seats were taken. So we were just wondering what was going on. So we dialed in as we normally do into the conference bridge for our virtual meeting with all the 100% remote people and the people who were telecommuting that day. And we said, we're
Uh,
here. Sorry.
There's a
Question?
time limit, Dave.
No, there's something you don't expect.
Hold on,
What happens?
we're having a technical problem here.
That was strange.
Oh, my goodness.
Unbelievable job. Yeah.
That's it, thank you. Have a good day.
No, hold on.
I'm joking.
Uh,
I had a full company meeting 3 weeks ago.
We're
And
back.
this happened every hour.
We're good, Dennis.
Okay, you can start again.
I can start again. So what does that mean? You want me to start from the top?
Right
or-
now, you're at the FAA meeting.
You were dialing in.
The cliffhanger.
So you were going now to the FAA meeting session. we
And,
talked
and,
And
and
you were trying to find out where these other people were.
yes, exactly. So,
And- And I have to move the volume up.
So, as you can see, we were wondering where was everyone else? And on the other side of the teleconference, they said, "What do you mean? Where are you?" Well, we're in the conference room. Where are you? We're in the conference room. What? So there was a lot of confusion. So what conference room are you in? Well, we're in the third floor, in the west wing, in the north section. What do you mean? How can this be that we're in the wrong conference room? They say you're in the wrong conference room. Now, if you look at this, can you see a problem with this?
Oh, yeah. It's O's and zeros, ones and I's.
Oh, and L's.
Yeah. As a person who has this happen to his name all the time, my name ends in an L and sometimes it turns into an I in people's minds. Because they speak
Exactly.
consonants in a row.
Or two vowels in a row.
None of the Eastern Europeans ever screw it up.
So this is the actual floor plan of the West Wing, as it were. And here we are, two different rooms. Which one was it? And so it was quite interesting. They said, well, the correct one is where you can see the White House. The White House? Yeah, the White House. And so you call this the White House conference room. Yeah, that's why we call it the White House conference room. Well, how am I supposed to know that? I'm inside. Lo and behold, here we are, 600 Maryland Avenue. Lo and behold, northwest is the White House. And we could see it from the conference room in the building. Oh, I see. Well, that's a little bit of a problem because you can't see it in the hallways inside, you know.
Right,
So-
right, right.
Ah,
So yeah, this is west, this is east, this is north, and this is south. So there we are. So a little bit what we call a pain point. And it involves both the user interface, which is ambiguous and uses text, and possible solutions. Someone goes back to this and says, what's wrong with this picture? I wish I had a picture. Gee, wouldn't it be nice to have a floor plan or something that helps me navigate to wherever this conference room is or whatever hot desk that I've been assigned or I assigned myself? Wouldn't it be great that I can actually see that room that I reserve is where it is supposed to be? That would be really nice. It's a nice to have. It was never implemented in the original system because that's a lot of work to have a visual aid to help people find a room, which are all labeled. However, the problem was there were so many rooms and so many offices and desks. They had alphanumeric designations, A through Z. Well, let's make it A through NN or NI or N1 or O even. Wow. Could be interesting. So that's what you have. So they never built that there was never I guess, a business case for that. Employees are sunk costs. You don't care whether you've wasted an hour or a day trying to get the work done. The work has to get done. So that's the pain point. So you start with that and a possible solution. But you have those key questions, how are you going to solve it? And what is that? And where would you use that solution? Who would actually use it? When would it be useful? And how would one use it? So there's all these basic questions that user experience research tries to attempt to answer. And that's good because you need to have that information in order to properly design and implement any application. Otherwise, you're literally flying blind. So let's say, hypothetically, because this doesn't exist at the FAA, but this does exist elsewhere, you have an application on a mobile phone, and you can create a reservation, you can meet at this specific location and say, I'm going to reserve that conference room, the here and now, that is, or schedule something in the future. So you can do all that. You can set it up, log in, log out, etc. But then say, hey, wouldn't it be great if we added a floor plan? Wouldn't that be nice? So here we are. What do we do? How can we help? What would this pain point, how could this pain point be addressed by an application? So now we're going to jump from that pain point that you now thoroughly have heard to the prototype. Let's see if we can get to the prototype here. All right, here, this is a prototype. And it's done in Axure. Let's see what's going on here. I'm going to read my email. Any case, let's see if we can get to it. Yeah, let's get to it. So here, if you had this application and you can prototype a potential solution because you want to prototype it because it's a low-cost way of testing things out, making sure it'll actually work before you implement it. And so let's say, oh, well, we can click on this or tap on this and, oh, wow, you get to a floor plan. Here's a floor plan. Wow, get that. It's like, oh, let's see what's going on here. Window desk number 5. Wow. Meeting room 10. That's interesting. This is telling me where these are in the floor plan and what it is. Imagine that. So meeting room 5 and window desk 1 or anything else like that. So there's going to be all these possibilities. So what happens? Well, let's say I want to book this room. I'm in this room. It's available right now at 9 to 10. Okay, let's book it. So yeah, it's now booked. Do you want to send invitations? And you say, nah, that's just for me. I'm going to be a hog and take the entire room. So no thanks. So you can do that. And as you notice, it has a window desk as opposed to an aisle desk or something else. So let's do that. If I want a window desk, same thing. I could book it, etc. So you have these types of prototypes of these different use cases and scenarios that you would create. So what's under the covers? How do you get from pain point to prototype like this before you implement? What are the steps? How do you get there? And that's kind of where we are. So here you have your user stories. I gave a whole story about the pain point and the personas. Who are these types of people? What's the profile? What are their motivations? How did they do their work? And then that research informs design to figure out, okay, what kind of wireframes are we going to come up based on what standards? Is it for Android? Is it for iOS or something else? Windows? Who knows? And maybe there's corporate design guidelines. There might be all kinds of ways that they would like all their apps to look the same. So there's a look and feel. And then you might prototype it for common tasks, run it through those sunny day scenarios, as it were, and test it and see how easy it might be and what kind of comments and issues that they run into, what kind of struggles they might have using the prototype, and then adjusting or making the appropriate changes and then developing it. Okay, so that's the general process. This is a generic one. Everyone's got different types of agile, waterfall, whatever design process they have, implementation process. But this is just a generic approach. So of course, where you do start, once you have that pain point or things that you have something you think you're going to fix, of course, you have to make sure everybody's in agreement. So you have your kickoff team meeting. And then, of course, do I have all the resources and the budget to do the work to conduct the research that informs design, identifying those requirements, user needs, pain points, and getting some insight about how people might use this floor plan. How would they browse it? Under what circumstances? And then under those activities, you say, well, who are these people? What's the persona? What are their stories? And then create this prototype. So this is the process that we're talking about here. So in this case, as an example, we're developing a portion or a module of an app, mobile one for that matter, that books rooms and desks based on user stories and use cases. And some of those features and functionality would be enabling to reserve an available conference room, find and reserve a hot desk using a floor plan as examples. So you have to answer the question, who? Who are these people? Well, it could be a visiting employee who's never been there before, has no clue what they're doing and where to go, or a hybrid worker who, essentially goes there once in a while, maybe weekly, monthly, and has meetings. So here's, one possible persona, Cheryl. She's visiting employee. She goes to lots of different locations and arranges them, and they're unfamiliar to her. And she wants to be able to book conference rooms quickly and easily. She's a perfectionist and likes to practice before the actual meetings and gets a lot of energy out of doing her PowerWorks during lunch. So here's a sort of a view that you can give designers and implementers, developers, an idea of who are they building this app, this module for. And here's some things you could tell them. Well, they get frustrated because they get lost. They can't find where they're going. They can't reserve a room or a desk. They run into these frustrations and they expect, hey, I should be able to do that. Why don't you have a map? Why can't you do that with the map? It's not there. So we come up with user stories. Gives you some motivations. I'd like to visit weekly, reserve a room for 8 people to host our weekly meetings. And when another one visits weekly and says, hey, you know, I am a social person. I like to socialize with people. That's my motivation. And so I want to reserve a hot desk near an aisle or a kitchen party where there's a lot of traffic and activity. And that's the whole point. Why go in if you're not going to talk to other people? That's the whole reason for going in. Again, and back to we talked about there, you know, maybe book a desk near the conference room. That I can prepare for my talk there or in the conference room itself. And what happens when you get frustrated? I can't find anything available because, as you know, a lot of these meetings, sometimes you have something called an all hands meeting. This means everybody in that organization comes in for some day and they want to have their get together. Problem is, then all of a sudden, everyone says, hey, well, we have a meeting before the meeting after the meeting. Next thing you know, we have meetings everywhere. The whole place is flooded with people and meetings, and there's just nothing available to reserve. So what do you do if you want to have a one-on-one meeting with a colleague or teammate or whoever it might be, a report, a supervisor? So how are these handled? And sometimes, you know, you like your window because at home you have your desk right by the window, you could see outside, you get the sunlight. Why can't I do that when I go into work as well? So here's the task flows of how it would be. You could launch your app, view the floor plan, book a meeting room, and you're done, right? Send invites to others, whatever it might be. So in the case of that's sort of a task flow. And you saw that going through the prototype, it exactly fits that sunny day scenario. Nothing goes wrong, but here you go, right? Similarly, here you have a meeting invite tells you, hey, you got a meeting now. I got to go there. You launched the app. It goes like, I got to see the floor plan, how to get there. And I go in there and then you could get to that meeting and desk and check in. Hey, I'm there. It's occupied. Because, you know, sometimes people reserve things and they never show up. So that would help with knowing what's really being utilized and what's not. And they used to have a rule where if you're 15 minutes late, that's it. No meeting, it's gone. So your reservation system can enforce that. In fact, I think in the FAA, they may have some of those mechanisms, but in the case, that's something that is important too. The meeting invitation reminds you, hey, where you gotta be, and then now you can launch this and you won't get lost if you see this map, maybe. So here are these use cases. We talked about meetings for your team of 8 people, a room by the desk, book a aisle desk. It's almost like an airline, getting your seat in an airline. But so it can be done. They're done graphically. This is the same thing. Why not, right? It's not much of a difference. Oops, typo. So you want to do your wireframes to prototype based on the type of device and the screen orientation. Then you might have error messages. Take care of situations when all the rooms and desks are reserved. What do you do about that? Because apparently it's enough to annoy someone in your personas or user profiles. So you need to handle those things that are not necessarily the sunny day scenarios, but some error cases. And they could be also, how do you handle all these other things like confirmation of the reservation and sending meeting invites as an example. So you have different things like orientation. They hold their smartphone either in portrait or landscape. You gotta deal with that and know how you're going to display it. And also, hey, if you had smartwatch, which is not shown here, that's going to be different. Can you really show a, a, a picture like that on a little watch? Probably not. So maybe the watch doesn't do this, and you can decide not to do that. And one might ask, okay, you could also tell them when the status is of a room. When you show these letters and things like that, oh, those are maybe occupied. And then you would have error messages when they're all occupied. It's like, sorry, no rooms are available, no desks are available. You want to see what you want. Hey, you want to take a walking meeting, meaning you walk around in the aisles or outside, one-on-one meetings. You get your exercise and you get your meeting all at the same time, and you're not using the resources. That's part of the experience. It's the melding of both the user experience and the user interface. So people wonder, what is the experience versus interface? You always see, we want a UX, UI. What is that? What the heck? Well, this is the UI, and the experience could be, hey, things are outside of just the particular user interface, but it's the experience, all the other surrounds, the context, which context matters. So you design for both. And you want it to be a desirable outcome, a desirable product. So instead of the minimum viable product, there's a thing called the minimum desirable product, because if people don't want to use it, doesn't matter. So you'd have these kinds of wireframes detailing out where the buttons are, what they would say, and you saw that in the prototype. Any questions? I heard someone say something, perhaps.
I always learned that the UI is each page. The user experience is how you get from page to page.
Well, there's the task flow, and that is the experience in the sense of the UI being having all these elements, but user interface, user interaction, which eye are we talking about? But yeah, it is definitely part of it from a flow, task flow, use case analysis perspective. But I was trying to say that it's even greater than those screens itself. It's everything that surrounds, because often what you find out is the structure and how an organization works is often expressed in their applications, and it's not necessarily user focus or customer focus. It's how that company or organization does its business. So you're reined into designing and implementing an application that fits that, and it fits the way the work is supposed to be done, but not how it actually might be done or should be done ideally, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the thing that needs to be taken into consideration as well. So here's all these different types of wireframes that you come up with, and these are the things that show up in the prototype. We beat me to have a question and answer, but I can also show in this prototype. Let's try it again. So you could also have check in with Bluetooth on your smartwatch, and it won't be quite the same as, give you the time, you just checked in, etc. But you could also have these same kinds of things show up to book the room, send the invites, etc. But here's an example of the flows. You can say, hey, booking a meeting, whether it's a smart watch, this is what you would do. If it's a smartphone, it's slightly different. And you have to take into account, well, is it portrait mode or landscape mode? And then can I show a floor plan? things like that. So these are considerations that you have to have in the workflow, in this case, the logic of what might happen for these different devices and what's appropriate. So it gets all decided upon so that, let's say, you usually have both your smartwatch and your phone at the same time, but maybe it says, hey, you accepted your invite, uh, and now you have the reminder, and now you want to see how to get there. Well, then there might be a button on the watch that says, yeah, I'll show you the map. Go look on your phone if you have it. Um, People might also ask things like, well, what do I do if, what about accessibility? What do we do about that? And how do we operate in this case? Well, it's something like a smartphone and a smartwatch. You might use speech input, speech recognition, and do explicit search. I want to find a conference room on the third floor, blah, blah, blah. So you can actually do these queries explicitly rather than while you're browsing. So you could do search or go to calendar, etc. So you can do these kinds of things and have that built into the user interface as well.
What application are you using?
Sorry?
What's the name of the application you're using? It's covered up by this meeting's name.
Oh, this is built by an Axure, Axure, not Azure, which is another product, Azure, which is a cloud. I think it's cloud-based. That's just the cloud, like AWS, but this is Axure with an X.
Thank you.
So any questions or anything like that? One thing I do want to add about this, I want to dedicate this presentation in memory of a person who was part of the local community for the user experience professional associations in New Jersey. Amy was a researcher, mostly designer, and what had been working for IBM at the time. And she was very helpful in creating some of the concepts in this slide deck that you saw here. And so I need to give recognition that of her contributions to this. So that's it. Anything else?
Thank you, John. Very interesting presentation. Was there any thought given or discussion given to renaming some of these rooms that had the numbers that were easy to mix up?
No, not at all.
Okay, I just thought I would ask. Yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, that's a lot of difficulty when you do enterprise-wide types of applications. You're not usually the customer. You might be an employee, and you don't have a lot of say in stuff in terms of the applications you're forced to use, and very limited in how you change it because you actually would have to, in some ways, think about it that it's more than just this. It's the user interface, but it's the whole it's a crazy way of how they actually did the labeling. It's like going to Home Depot, they had to literally redesign how they labeled everything so people could actually find things in Home Depot, right? That was a major, major effort. So that you would have to really do that to the building. And typically IT does not really mix with facilities for some reason. And then you could say, well, you can really make some simple fixes. That's right. Yeah. Make sure that the zeros have a slash through them or something, and a one that you use sans serifs, so you actually could tell the difference between an I, a one, and L. But yeah, that's usually, unfortunately, hey, that's a third-party application. We have no control of it. If a vendor does this, they use this font, we can't change it. It's baked in, hard-coded, whatever it might be. So it's the usual problems as you'd hear about why things aren't done despite the challenges. But you probably have heard all those, and I wouldn't want to go into it. But and again, this is a hypothetical example. This was not ever proposed to the FAA and is not to be attributed to the FAA because it wasn't. I was giving FAA as an actual real life personal experience, showing that there is in fact a need for this kind of visual presentation of doing this, because I actually had this idea way before I actually worked for the FAA. So it had nothing to do with the FAA actually at all, but it was a good story because it actually did happen to me personally. And yeah, so that was a good way just to share and give context as a pain point as to why one would want this kind of application.
All right.
Fantastic.
Very informative.
Yay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, I appreciate it.
We'll meet you in real life someday. But we love the virtual stuff too, so.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, John, very
John.
much.
Bye-bye.